Hi, my name is Sam Phillips. I'm a manager with Kerkering Barberio and Company in the Audit and Assurance Division. This presentation is for healthcare entities that received COVID-19 funding from the Department of Health and Human Services, also known as HHS. I'm going to go over an aspect of the funding that you may not be aware of, which are special audit requirements. These audits are not performed by HHS, but rather an independent auditor that you would engage. And just to note, while I may refer to the Provider Relief Fund specifically throughout the presentation, there may be other funding from HHS that you need to consider in regards to the audit requirements, and I'll go over those shortly. I'll discuss who is impacted. And for those who are impacted, there are a couple of audit options. I'll discuss what they are and the differences between them. And then finally, I'll give you suggestions on what you can do to prepare, including some available resources. So here is a summary of the COVID-19 funding that healthcare providers may have received. With both the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, since those funds were awarded by federal agencies, they were evaluated to see if these special audit requirements would apply. And the good news is that they don't. However, that doesn't mean that they still can't be audited by the SBA. And then what you see listed below are the funds distributed or awarded by HHS. The Provider Relief Fund includes both the general distributions and the targeted distributions, such as those that went to skilled nursing facilities and nursing homes. The uninsured COVID-19 testing and treatment funding is another one to consider. This funding provides claims reimbursement to healthcare providers for the testing, treatment, and vaccine administration for uninsured individuals. So the Provider Relief Fund and the uninsured testing and treatment are the two that I wanted to point out specifically. I'm not going to go into detail on the others below that, but if you received funding from them, you should be considering those when determining if the audit requirements apply to you. So who is impacted? Well, first, there is a threshold, and that is those entities that expended $750,000 or more in total federal awards. Typically, these audit requirements are common with nonprofits, as they often receive grants from the federal government. But with the Provider Relief Fund and other HHS awards, commercial or for-profit entities are subject to the requirements. And so while the Provider Relief Fund may be the only funds you received, if you did receive any other federal awards, you'll want to make sure to take those into consideration when calculating whether or not you've met the $750,000 threshold. And it is estimated that thousands of entities will undergo an audit like this for the first time. So for-profit entities have two options for meeting the audit requirement. Nonprofits must select this first option, which is a single audit. And within that option, there is the possibility for what's known as a program-specific audit. One of the positives with this first option is that there is audit guidance available, so there's more certainty in knowing what to expect at this time. The second option is a financial audit of all HHS awards performed in accordance with GAGAS, or Generally Accepted Governmental Auditing Standards. And I'll go into more detail on what that means in an upcoming slide. But with this option, we are waiting on guidance from HHS, so there is less certainty with it. So what is a single audit? Well, it has two main components: a financial statement audit of the entity, including a supplementary schedule of federal awards, also known as the CFA. The second part is a compliance audit. And this is where an auditor will look at internal controls and perform tests around them. For example, what's your process around cash disbursements? Do you have adequate safeguards in place to prevent unauthorized purchases? Also, auditors test your compliance with the terms and conditions of the award. They won't test every single one, but just those that are determined to be direct and material. And with this option, there are 3 layers of standards, as you see there on the slide, under which the audits are performed, which makes it a very comprehensive option. And as I mentioned, within option number one is the possibility of a program-specific audit, which may be a viable option if the only funds you received are the provider relief funds. The financial statement piece is not at the entity-wide level, unlike a full single audit. It's only at the program level, with the program being the provider relief fund. So in that respect, it is less involved than a full single audit. This slide shows dates of when the Provider Relief Fund will be reported on the CFA. The intent behind these established dates is so that the reporting in the CFA will line up with the reporting that recipients will submit to HHS. So for those with a fiscal year ended before 12/31/2020, recipients will report the 2020 Provider Relief Fund expenditures and lost revenues in an audit based on their fiscal year ending in 2021. So a little bit more time with this one if your fiscal year ended before 12/31/2020. But those with a fiscal year ended 12/31/20, the provider relief funds will be reported on the CFA prepared in their 2020 audit. And then the same applies for those with fiscal years ending after 12/31/2020, but before 6/30/2021. And then after that, we'll have to wait for more guidance. Single audits are generally required to be done within the earlier of 30 days after the audit is issued or 9 months after fiscal year end. However, there is currently an automatic 3-month extension available for those receiving COVID-19 funding who would have had due dates through June 30, 2021. And that may be a little bit confusing. So I do want to stress that the timing shown here is for those who choose or are required to have the single audit. But based on what we're hearing, this may not be the option that most for-profit entities go with. And with that option, number two, the timing has not yet been established. So option number two, what does it mean to have a GAGAS financial related audit? Well, there will be a statement of costs and loss revenues, or something similarly named, which is essentially the financial statement, including notes to the financial statement, which are minimal, such as a description of the entity, significant accounting policies, and the fact that the funding is subject to review by HHS, which could result in repayment of funds. With this option, the auditor will issue an opinion as to whether the statement of costs and loss revenues is fairly stated. But unlike a single audit, under this type of audit, the auditor will not actually issue an opinion on compliance. And then there will be a report issued indicating whether there were any compliance issues or material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal controls. So it may sound similar to the program-specific option or the program-specific audit, but with the program-specific audit, it is a little bit more involved with the internal controls reporting. So it's not exactly the same. And as I mentioned, under option number two, there are some uncertainties. The delays in the HHS portal launch and the need for more guidance from HHS has made it difficult to begin these audits. We're waiting for guidance as it relates to the reporting. For example, will it be based on funds received or expended? And then what's the accounting framework that the statement of costs will be prepared under? Will it be GAAP or accrual basis or some other basis? And then, as I mentioned, finally, the timing is still up in the air. So whether or not that single audit timing in option number one translates over to this one is not yet known. There are things that you can do to prepare now. The first one being document, document, document. And I can't stress this enough. Make sure that you have the records and documentation to support the amount of funding you spent, whether it's on the actual expenses or how you calculated the lost revenues. This is really critically important to making sure that you have a smooth audit. Second, review, and if they aren't already, document your internal control processes. Regardless of which option is appropriate for your entity, auditors will be looking at internal controls. Third, stay informed. The information seems to be ever changing. So on the next slide, there are some resources that you may find helpful. And then finally, contact us. We are here to help. Not all CPAs can do these audits, either because they provide services to their clients which impair independence, or because they don't have the necessary training. We have the necessary training. However, there may be circumstances that prevent us from performing the audit, in which case we can still help you prepare so that you're ready when the time comes. Because not being prepared could result in a report of deficiencies and question costs, meaning that funds that you thought you could keep may need to be paid back. So here are the resources that I mentioned. I would highly recommend the first one there, the frequently asked questions on the HHS Provider Relief Fund. This will be very important in keeping informed. So I would encourage you to check that one out. And then the others are specific to the single audit or the compliance audit, and they're very helpful as well. Okay, I thank you for your time. And if you do have any questions, please contact me or your Kerkering Barberio team member at the number shown. Thank you so much.